I thought I was watching a pack of wolves hunt, until I realized they weren't after a kill. They were about to do something no human would believe. When the wolf burst out from behind the spruce, my breath caught. Because I realized he wasn't looking at me, I froze in my tracks on the narrow, snow-covered trail. The cold air stung my cheeks. The weight of my old rifle slung over my shoulder felt heavier than usual. I was heading home after checking a few traps, a habit I'd kept for decades. This stretch of winter forest was always quiet at dusk, just the crunch of my boots and the occasional raven calling from the pines. But then I heard it, a scream, a woman's voice, high, raw, and frantic. At first I thought I was imagining it. Sound plays tricks in the cold. But there it was again, sharper this time. My eyes swept the clearing up ahead, and I saw her, maybe 30 yards away, in the middle of a small, snow-covered hollow. Her arms were thrashing, her face white with terror, her mouth open in another scream. And then I saw what she was in. Not snow, but the half-frozen surface of a bog. I took a step toward her, and that's when he appeared, a massive gray wolf, leaping through the drifts from the tree line, muscles rolling under his winter coat. His breath poured from his mouth in pale clouds. He was coming straight for us. Instinct took over. My hand shot to the rifle, but I never got the chance to aim because he didn't charge me. He didn't even glance at me. He stopped, planting himself between me and the woman, head low, legs spread, tail stiff. He wasn't attacking. He was blocking me. I was sure he was about to lunge at me, but he didn't. He just stared, straight into my eyes. I've seen wild wolves before. Their gaze is sharp, calculating, the look of a predator sizing you up. This was different. There was no hatred there, no hunger, just urgency, a deep, almost human worry. And it rattled me more than teeth or snarls ever could. Behind him, the woman flailed, snow and black water sucking at her hips. The bog made a sound like wet cloth tearing every time she moved. The wolf flicked his head toward her, then back to me, almost as if he was trying to tell me something. I took a cautious step to the right. He mirrored it. I stepped left. So did he. He was keeping me in place. "Are you insane?" I muttered under my breath. "She's going to drown." Without warning, the wolf broke from his stance and darted in a wide arc around the bog. His paws barely broke the crust of snow, his body a blur against the white. He stopped near the edge, where the ice turned dark with water beneath, and lifted his muzzle high. Then he let out a short, sharp howl. It wasn't the long, echoing call I've heard in deep winter nights. This was clipped, urgent, a signal. It sent a shiver right through me. The woman's cries were growing weaker. Her arms trembled as she clawed at the snow around her, but each time it slid back into the freezing water. The wolf lowered his head, stepping with delicate precision, testing the ground before each move. I wanted to run in and grab her. Every muscle screamed to move, but something about the way he moved, the care, the purpose, rooted me where I stood. This wasn't random. This wasn't a predator circling easy prey. From somewhere deep in the trees came an answer, another howl, then another, closer. My eyes snapped toward the sound. Two shapes emerged from the shadows, moving fast over the snow. Wolves. Now I was certain. This was it. The end. I lifted the rifle to my shoulder, finger brushing the trigger, but the big gray turned his head toward me again, locking eyes with mine. And I swear, in those yellow eyes, there was no threat, just a request. It made my hands falter. I lowered the gun. The two newcomers reached the bog's edge and immediately began pawing at the snow, pushing clumps of moss and ice toward the woman, almost as if building a surface for her. She stared at them wide-eyed, her lips blue, too exhausted to scream now. The gray wolf stepped closer to her, lifting a paw and pressing it gently against her shoulder, the way a person might steady a friend. My stomach flipped. This wasn't a hunting pack. This was something else entirely. In that moment, the last piece of my fear slipped into something stranger. Disbelief. There was worry in his eyes, not rage, and that rattled me to my core. I took another slow step toward the bog, testing the crust under my boots. The wolves all turned their heads toward me, but none moved to block me this time. They just watched. That's when I knew. I was standing in the middle of something I had no words for, something I shouldn't even be seeing. The gray wolf began to circle the bog, his paws placing themselves in deliberate, measured steps. He kept his body low, head down, ears twitching as if every shift in the snow told him something. Then he stopped and started digging, quick, forceful strokes of his paws, sending snow and clumps of frozen moss flying behind him. At first I thought he was just restless, or maybe trying to find a safer footing. But as I watched, it hit me. He was looking for something, or maybe calling for something. Every few seconds he would pause, glance toward the woman, then glance into the dark fringe of trees beyond. Her breathing was ragged now, shallow. The black water clung to her waist like a fist. She tried to lift herself, but the bog pulled back with a slow, sucking sound. Then I heard it, faint at first, almost mistaken for the wind, a distant howl. My pulse jumped. Another answered, closer. And then, from between the pines, 2 more wolves appeared, moving fast but with the same cautious precision as the first. I gripped the stock of my rifle. 3 wolves now. If they decided we were the easier prey, there'd be no stopping them. But they didn't come for me. They didn't even glance in my direction. They ran straight to the edge of the bog, right where the woman struggled. The moment they reached her, they dropped their heads and began shoving snow and moss toward her with their muzzles, stamping it down with their paws. I stood there, completely still, trying to make sense of it. They weren't attacking her. They weren't tearing at her clothes or flesh. They were building something, a surface. I told myself I was wrong, that I was watching them toy with her before the kill, like cats with a mouse. That made more sense. Predators play with prey, don't they? And yet, every movement was careful. Every push of moss seemed aimed to keep her from sinking deeper. She turned her head weakly toward them, eyes glassy, lips trembling. She didn't scream anymore. I don't think she had the strength. One of the wolves brushed her arm with his muzzle, then stepped back as the big gray moved in. He stood beside her, paws planted on a patch of frozen moss. He lowered his head, then, and I will never forget this, he lifted one paw and placed it gently against her shoulder, not shoving, not pinning, just steadying her. I saw him push her toward the edge, carefully, like a person might guide someone across thin ice. And in that second, something inside me cracked. This wasn't hunting. This wasn't instinct I'd been told about. This was something else entirely. One of the smaller wolves kept darting between 2 points, pulling up tufts of grass and laying them down in front of her like steps. The third one moved in a slow arc, pressing down the loose snow around her hips so it would hold. I stood there frozen, my breath clouding the air. My mind kept trying to shove the scene into something I understood: territorial behavior, strange coincidence, anything. But every detail kept shoving back. The woman was trembling, but I saw her right hand clutch at the moss the wolves had packed beneath her. It held. The gray wolf stepped back slightly, ears flicking toward me, his eyes locked on mine again, and I felt the weight of that look in my chest. It was almost as if he was telling me, "Now it's your turn." I should have moved then, but I didn't. I couldn't, because in that moment, all I could think was how absurd it would sound if I ever tried to tell this story. 3 wolves working together, not to kill a human, but to save one. Who would believe that? The smaller wolf nudged the woman again, his nose against her arm, as if urging her to shift her weight. The gray pressed his shoulder into hers, guiding her toward the patch they'd built. Every movement deliberate, every touch careful. And I remember thinking, if this is playing with prey, it's the strangest game I've ever seen. I couldn't take it anymore, standing there while she fought for her life, while these wolves worked around her. It was tearing at me. My instincts screamed to move. My boots crunched forward through the snow. The gray wolf's head snapped toward me instantly. I froze mid-step. His body stiffened, ears forward, his breath fogging the air between us. The woman's lips moved, but no sound came. She was shivering so hard her teeth clicked, her face ghostly pale. I could hear her breath now, short, shallow gasps, each one weaker than the last. I tried another step. The gray's lips curled just enough to show the faint line of his teeth. Not a full snarl, more like a warning, a boundary. I stopped again. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw the smaller wolf, the one with a white patch on his chest, clamp his jaws on the woman's scarf. He tugged, sharp and deliberate. The other wolf, the darker one, grabbed at the strap of the bag slung over her shoulder. They weren't biting her. They weren't even tearing at the fabric like scavengers. They were pulling, testing. For a moment, her body shifted upward an inch or two. A wet sucking sound came from the bog, like it didn't want to let go. Her head tilted toward them, and she whispered something I couldn't make out. Her voice was hoarse, just a broken thread of sound. Every muscle in me wanted to run in and take her hand, but the gray was still between us, eyes locked on mine. Then something changed. He let out a short, low chuff, not a growl, not a howl, and stepped back. 3 paces. The 2 smaller wolves still tugged gently at her clothes, trying to coax her forward. The gray kept backing away until he was no longer between me and her. Then he stopped, squared himself to me, and met my eyes again. I thought, finally, he understands. He's letting me in. He's decided I'm not a threat. I took that first step toward her, heart pounding in my ears. The snow under me gave a little, the crust cracking. I kept my eyes on the woman's, trying to will her to hang on. But then the gray moved again. Forward this time, fast, closing the gap between us in 2 long strides. Not charging, not snapping, but with such sudden purpose that I stopped dead. He stood there, chest heaving, our faces maybe 6 feet apart, and in his eyes, it wasn't trust, it wasn't even warning. It was something heavier. It was expectation. He was looking at me like I was the one who had to make the next move, the final move, the one to end this. That look pinned me harder than any threat could have. It was like he was saying, I've done what I can. Now it's on you. The woman's arms slid down, her fingers brushing the surface of the moss they'd packed. The smaller wolf shifted his grip on her scarf, pulling in a slow, steady rhythm, like he'd done it before. The darker one kept pressing moss under her, pushing it toward her hips with his snout. I swallowed hard and stepped forward again. This time, the gray didn't block me. He moved aside, pacing to my left, his gaze flicking between me and her. I was close enough now to see the ice crusting at the edges of her hair, the gray blue of her lips. I could smell the bog, that sour, earthy rot beneath the snow. I reached for her, kneeling on the hard-packed snow the wolves had built up. My gloves closed around her wrists. Her skin was ice cold. She was lighter than I expected, as if half her weight had already gone into the water. The smaller wolf gave one last tug on her scarf, then stepped back, ears flat. The darker one did the same, standing just far enough away to watch. The gray stood perfectly still, eyes never leaving mine. I realized my hands were trembling. I pulled. She rose an inch. The bog groaned. I pulled again, teeth clenched, feeling the icy water splash against my boots. And for the first time since he appeared, the gray wolf took a step forward, not to interfere, but to stand beside me, shoulder to shoulder. I didn't dare look at him, but I could feel his presence there, not threatening, not even protective, just present, as if to say, "We're doing this together." I dropped to my knees. The cold bit through my pants instantly, but I didn't care. The only way to reach her was to crawl, slow and low, keeping my weight spread over the crust of snow the wolves had trampled into place. The gray wolf watched me for a moment, then moved to the side, clearing a path. The other two stepped back as well, circling to the edges of the bog as if they knew exactly where the ground was safest. I started forward, inch by inch. The ice groaned beneath me, a deep, hollow sound that made my gut tighten. Each time my knee pressed down, the snow cracked in a jagged line toward the water. When I was halfway to her, I felt the surface shift under my chest, and then give. The crust split with a sharp crack, and I sank, the cold water grabbing my leg like a hand. I gasped. My arms shot out to spread my weight, but the hole widened, the snow breaking away in chunks. The shock of the icy water sent pain straight up my spine. My boot was stuck, the suction pulling me down. Before I could even think to shout, there was a rush of movement beside me. The gray wolf lunged forward, teeth flashing, and clamped onto the thick fabric of my jacket. He jerked backward, the force nearly dislocating my shoulder, but my leg came free. I slid onto firmer snow, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The wolf released me immediately, stepping back without so much as a growl. I lay there for a second, sucking in ragged breaths, staring at him. His sides heaved, steam rising off his coat, and all I could think was, he just pulled me out. I crawled forward again, more carefully this time. The wolves shadowed my movements, keeping just far enough away to avoid adding their weight to the fragile surface. The woman was sinking fast now. The water had climbed to her waist, the black surface lapping against the heavy folds of her coat. Her eyes were half closed, her lips moving without sound. "Stay with me," I muttered, the words as much to myself as to her. The gray reached her first. He crept to the edge, leaned down, and bit into the thick fabric of her sleeve. Not hard, just enough to hold. He braced his legs wide and began to pull, slow and steady. I slid in beside him, lying flat to spread my weight, and reached for her hands. Her skin was like ice. My gloves slipped on her wet fingers, so I locked my grip around her wrists instead. "Got you," I said, though I wasn't sure if she could hear me. We pulled together, me from the front, the wolf from the side. She shifted upward, just a little, enough for the bog to make a sick, sucking sound. Her legs kicked weakly under the water. I gritted my teeth and pulled harder, feeling the strain in my arms and lower back. The wolf gave a short, deep growl, not at me, but in effort, and his paws dug deeper into the snow for leverage. Slowly, inch by inch, she began to rise. First, her hips cleared the surface, then her thighs. Water poured off her clothes in sheets, soaking the snow beneath us. With one final heave, she slid onto the mossy patch the other wolves had built, collapsing face down in the snow. She coughed once, twice, water spraying from her mouth. I scrambled closer, rolling her onto her back, checking that she was breathing. Her chest rose and fell in shallow, quick movements. Her eyes fluttered open for half a second, then closed again. I turned to the gray, ready to say something, though I had no idea what. But he was already stepping back, his gaze sweeping over both of us like he was taking stock. We had her out. She was alive. And for the first time since this all began, I let myself believe it was over. We'd done it. We'd pulled her from the bog. I thought it was finished. I couldn't have been more wrong. She lay on the snow gasping, coughing hard, water streaming from her mouth and down her chin. Each breath was ragged but real. I stayed crouched beside her, one hand on her shoulder, just listening to that sound, the sound of someone still alive. For the first time since I'd heard her scream, I felt my body loosen. We'd made it. She was out. The wolves, whatever this had been, it was over. That's when the gray wolf's head snapped up. His ears went stiff, his gaze locked past me into the trees, and a low, rolling growl rose from deep in his chest. I turned. At first I saw nothing but the black shapes of spruce trunks and the drifting mist of my own breath. Then, between two trees, a shape moved. Broad, heavy, deliberate. A bear. Its fur was mottled with frost, shoulders humped, head swaying side to side as it walked. Even at this distance, I could hear the crunch of its weight on the snow. It must have caught the scent or the sound of the struggle and come to investigate. The woman didn't move. She might not have even known it was there, but the wolves did. The gray stepped forward immediately, his body stiff, tail low, a deep rumble vibrating in the air. The darker wolf moved to his right, the one with the white chest to his left. They formed a line, a wall of fur and teeth between us and the bear. I didn't even think to raise my rifle. Somehow, I knew it wouldn't matter. The bear stopped about 20 yards out, sniffing the air, head turning toward the wolves. It huffed, steam pluming from its muzzle, and took a slow step forward. The gray answered with a single sharp bark, not the wild howl from before, but something short and dangerous. His hackles rose in a ridge down his spine. The other two mirrored him, their stances tense, shoulders squared. The bear's eyes locked on them, ignoring me and the woman completely. It took another step, testing them. The wolves didn't move back. If anything, they leaned forward. Something in that moment hit me hard. They weren't defending territory. They weren't just protecting their own. They were standing for us. And it didn't make sense. Not in any way the world had ever taught me to understand wolves. But there it was, right in front of me. The bear stopped again, swinging its head, weighing the distance. The gray's growl deepened until I could feel it in my bones. For a long moment, no one moved. Then the bear let out a short grunt, swung its head away, and began to back into the trees. Step by step, it faded into the shadows until there was nothing but the sound of branches snapping in the distance. My chest loosened. I let out a long, shaky breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. It was over, this time for real. The danger was gone. I turned toward the gray wolf, ready to, God knows what. Thank him, speak, anything. I opened my mouth, but before I could say a word, his head swung back toward the trees again. She was lying on her back now, her breathing steadier but still shallow. Her eyes opened for a moment, then filled with tears. At first, I thought it was just the shock, the cold, the relief of being alive. But then she spoke. Her voice was a whisper, brittle and raw. They found me yesterday. I blinked at her. Who? She nodded toward the wolves still standing at the edge of the clearing, their bodies half turned toward the woods but their eyes flicking back to us. They found me, she repeated, her voice trembling. I was lost. I'd been walking for hours. No idea where I was. And then I saw them, all three. I stared at her, my mind trying to force her words into some other shape. They didn't touch me, she went on, the words spilling out between small, sharp breaths. Didn't growl, just stood there, watching. Then the gray one. Her voice caught, and she swallowed hard. He turned and started walking away. The others followed, and I followed them. The image that formed in my head didn't make sense. Wolves don't lead humans through the woods. Wolves don't tolerate humans trailing behind them. They took me along a frozen stream, she said, her gaze unfocused, like she was watching it all again in her mind. The snow was easier there. I thought maybe they were guiding me out. I don't even know why I trusted them. I just did. I glanced at the wolves. None of them looked at me. Their attention was still fixed on the tree line. But the gray's ears twitched, as if he could hear every word. It got dark, she continued, her voice quieter now. I tried to keep up, but I was tired. I must have fallen behind. I saw them waiting for me up ahead, and I hurried. Her voice broke. I stepped wrong. The ice, it just gave way. I went through, into the water under the snow. Her hands clenched at the fabric of her coat. I screamed. They were there in seconds. All three. They tried to pull me out, but I was stuck, and the light was gone. I told them to go, but they stayed. They stayed all night. I could see it now, her trapped in that dark, freezing hole, the wolves pacing the edge, unable to help, but refusing to leave. The idea sent a cold through me that had nothing to do with the snow under my knees. In the morning, she whispered, they started building something, pulling moss, packing snow. I didn't understand. I still don't. She shook her head slowly, as if the weight of it was too much. Her voice was fading, each word softer than the last. And then you came. I didn't know what to say. I looked at her, then at the wolves, then back again. It was too much to process, too far outside the rules I thought I knew about nature. For a moment, I let myself believe it was exactly what it sounded like. A miracle. A lost woman, found by a pack of wolves. Wolves that didn't harm her, but guided her, stayed with her, protected her, even tried to save her when she fell into the bog. I thought this was a story about a miracle, but I was wrong. She was quiet for a moment, staring up at the pale winter sky. Her lips trembled as she spoke again, softer than before. They weren't looking for me, she said. I frowned. What do you mean? Her eyes shifted toward the gray wolf, who still stood watch at the edge of the clearing. They were looking for their pup. For a second, I didn't understand. The words didn't fit with the scene I'd just lived through. My mind stalled on them, turning them over like stones in my hand. Then something inside me told me to look, really look, at the edge of the bog. I scanned the snow and ice, and that's when I saw it. A small mound, half buried where the crust had been broken. Just enough of it was visible, a patch of soft gray fur, darker at the tips, the size of a curled-up house cat. A lump rose in my throat. I crawled closer, my knees crunching through the top layer of snow. The closer I got, the more I could see. The tiny paw, stiff with cold, the fragile curve of a head tucked under, the frost clinging to the fur. It wasn't moving. It hadn't been moving for a long time. A wolf pup. The air around me seemed to thin. I could feel the eyes of the pack on me, heavy and silent. I didn't need to look to know they were watching. I understood then. This was why they had come here, why they had lingered at the bog. They hadn't been waiting for a lost woman. They'd been searching for one of their own. And when they found her instead of the pup, they didn't walk away. I sat back on my heels, staring at that tiny body. My chest felt tight, my breath coming shallow. I thought of the hours they must have spent here before I arrived, trying to pull it free, nudging it, digging around it, refusing to accept what had already happened. And when another living thing, even the wrong one, was trapped in the same death, they couldn't leave it there. I thought of all the times I'd heard people talk about wolves as nothing more than killers. I'd believed it myself, more often than not. But killers don't stand in the cold all night for something that isn't even their own. They saved me, the woman said quietly, her voice breaking, because they couldn't save him. The gray wolf turned his head toward us then, not for long, just enough for our eyes to meet. There was no rage in that look, no triumph, no fear, just something I couldn't name, something older than words, and it hit me hard, sharper than the cold in my bones. They had done for her, and for me, what I could never have done for them. If I'd found their pup in that water, I know myself well enough to admit it. I wouldn't have risked my life to save it. I would have told myself nature was nature, that some things just happen, and I would have walked away. But they hadn't. They'd spent every ounce of strength they had to keep a living thing from dying alone, even when it wasn't theirs, even when it wasn't their kind. The pup's fur stirred slightly as the wind shifted, and for a strange moment, it felt like he was still part of the scene, like he was the reason every impossible thing that had happened here had happened at all. The gray took a step forward, closing the space between himself and the small mound. He didn't touch it. He just stood there, head lowered, the steam of his breath curling over the snow. The other two came to stand beside him. The three of them stood together, silent, their bodies blocking the wind from that tiny shape in the snow. And I realized they weren't ready to leave yet. The gray wolf stayed beside the pup for a long moment, the steam of his breath curling into the pale air. Then, without a sound, he turned away. The other two followed him, their paws pressing soundless paths into the snow. They didn't look back, not once. I watched them until their shapes blurred into the trees, until the gray of their coats melted into the gray of the forest. And then they were gone. The silence that followed was strange, not empty, but charged, as if the air still held the echo of what had just happened. The woman shifted beside me, pulling her coat tighter, her breath shallow but steady. I put a hand on her shoulder, more to steady myself than her. My whole body was trembling. It wasn't the cold, it was the weight of it all, what I'd seen, what I couldn't explain. My mind kept circling back to the same thought, over and over, like a line carved into stone. Animals remember kindness, even when you haven't given it to them. I thought of the hours they'd stood guard over her, the way they'd worked together to keep her from sinking, the way they'd stood between us and the bear, and all of it had been born out of a grief they hadn't been able to undo. They didn't owe her anything. They certainly didn't owe me anything. But still, they'd acted. We stayed there for a while, catching our breath. Eventually, I helped her to her feet, and together, we began the slow walk back toward the trail. Every so often, I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see the gray wolf standing there. But the only marks left of them were the prints in the snow, already filling with the fine flakes drifting down from the sky. By the time we reached the main path, the light was thinning. The woman leaned on me, her steps unsteady, but she never spoke again. I didn't either. What was there to say? Anything I tried to put into words would sound impossible. That night, sitting by my fire, I replayed it all in my head. The first howl, the circle of paw prints around the bog, the way the gray had looked at me like I was the one who had to make the final move. And no matter how many times I turned it over, it still didn't feel real. But it had been real. I'd seen it. I'd felt the pull of the gray's teeth on my jacket, the weight of the woman's wrists in my hands as we dragged her free. I'd heard the rumble in his chest when the bear appeared, and I'd seen the still shape of the pup and the way they'd stood over him. The image wouldn't leave me. A week later, I went back. I told myself it was to check the traps, but I knew that wasn't true. I needed to see the place again, to prove to myself it was still there, that I hadn't dreamed the whole thing. The snow was deeper now, the air sharper. The clearing was quiet when I stepped into it, just the faint creak of trees swaying in the wind. The bog lay frozen and still, its surface covered in an unbroken layer of white. But when I came closer, I saw them, tracks, fresh ones. They curved along the edge of the clearing, just where the wolves had stood that day. I followed them with my eyes. And then I saw something else, my own boot prints, From that day, shallow now, softened by snow, but still there, and right beside them, so close they nearly overlapped, paw prints, 3 sets, 1 large, 2 smaller. They'd walked where I had walked, step for step. I knelt down, tracing the edge of one with my glove. The shape was perfect, the snow inside still crisp. These weren't old, they'd been here recently, maybe even this morning. For a moment I just stared, my breath hanging in the cold air. It hit me then. They hadn't just been passing through. They'd come back, and they'd remembered this place, remembered me. The thought tightened something in my chest. Not fear, not exactly awe either. Something heavier, something that made me feel small in the best possible way. Because whatever this was, whatever had happened here, it was no accident. I stood there for a long time, my eyes moving between the paw prints and my own fading tracks. The wind brushed against the back of my neck, cold and light. Somewhere in the distance, far enough that it might have been my imagination, a single howl rose over the snow. I closed my eyes and let it wash over me. People say things like this don't happen, that wild animals are wild for a reason, that there's no room in nature for mercy or for grief or for anything like what I'd seen. But I know better now, because I was there, and I saw it myself. If your heart is full of reverence right now, nature is wiser than we are.